Mr. Secretary, thank you as well for your testimony and for your saying yes to the President coming back into public service. I appreciate that very much. Let me very respectfully urge you to consider going a bit further with New York City. I don't seek to get an applause out of this audience at all. I do think the dots in this case connected say that it is very likely that New York City is going to be the next terrorist attack point in the country. It's been attacked twice. Third attempt over the landmarks effort. We heard yesterday Commissioner Kerrey talk about the New York City Police Department intercepting 2 attempts since 9/11. I think you've got to separate the city out. It bears a disproportionate share of national security effort. The effort of local law enforcement and local fire department people here really are providing a national security function beyond what's going on in any other state or any other municipality. And I think unless you separate it out, from my own experience authorizing and appropriating, and I told Commissioner Gordon here that I got an email message earlier from somebody who was listening, attacking me for getting that increased money for Nebraska. I vote in New York City today, so I didn't do the stuff but I do have experience with it, and I think unless you separate it out, it's going to be exceptionally difficult to get the resources necessary to make certain that if there's another one, we have the resources to surge, to do the response, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I also appreciate the answer that you gave to Senator Gordon just a few minutes ago on universities. A third of our degree students are international, not just the incoming students, but conferences, et cetera. And you are exactly right, entirely justified in the early days after 9/11, and I appreciate very much you're looking to review that, because it really does, in a very real way, represent outsourcing in reverse for the United States of America. So as we hear this outsourcing issue, remember in higher education, it's outsourcing in reverse, and there's lots of competitive opportunities for our international students other than the United States of America. You mentioned the U.S. visit program, and I do, for a range of reasons, use my passport for identification, and here it is. And it's paper. Right. I mean, it is a paper document. It's really an archaic system of keeping track of people. I have in my billfold, I'm going to pull them out, all kinds of pieces of plastic that are much more sophisticated ways of determining whether or not I am who I say I am when I'm trying to engage in a transaction. And you use the number of million people on the visit program. There's, I think, 440 million annual visitors to the United States, so it's a relatively small fraction that we're getting with that biometric system. Can you tell me how quickly you expect to have, if not 100%, pretty close to 100% of U.S. visitors being able to use a more, I think it's got to be a much more efficient, as well as a system much more likely to be a very strong deterrent against somebody who wants to forge one of these documents to come to the United States, as we believe all 19 of the individuals who came to the United States did. So can you, sure. When do you expect the U.S. visit program to be 100% implemented?
The mandate of Congress was to get the U.S. visit program in place at seaports and airports by the end of last year. We are mandated to have an entry-exit system at the 50 largest land borders by the end of this year. And we will meet that goal, probably using a different kind of technology, because the land borders between Canada and Mexico, we've got to configure a system where we can be relatively sure of who's coming across without putting pedestrian, vehicular, and commercial traffic to a screeching halt. And we are exploring different kinds of technology to enable us to reduce the risk of someone unwanted and undesirable coming across the border. Having said that, and looking at that document, I would hope that since we are asking the rest of the world to give us their fingerprints and their photograph when they come into our country, and we've had some very good conversations, because as we go about trying to deal with the responsibility of governments just to make, wherever they are, to make sure that they protect their borders, getting the international community to buy into a single standard. It's not a U.S. standard plus another world standard. We need one international standard. There's surprising support for both photographs across the board, and in some areas even for finger scans. So I think one of the things we could do in this country, be somewhat, perhaps be controversial, but if we want to lead the rest of the world, then we ought to start requiring digital photographs and finger scans on our own passports. It'd be a lot easier to go out to the rest of the world to say, when you come into our country, we'd like to have your fingerprints and your photographs on yours and on your visa. So.
Well, I can just tell you that as one person who travels, unfortunately, a great deal commercial inside the United States of America, I would certainly welcome that.
Sure.
I mean, I get asked because I've got metal in my leg from the same place you went a number of years ago. I get asked to take off my pants all the time, and I mean, go through all this. I mean, it's truly. I mean, I don't take a great deal of comfort when I fly commercially. Yep. For feeling safer on the commercial airplanes as a consequence of the regulatory friction that are currently in place. So if it needs to be a voluntary system, I'd volunteer. But I think the timeline for implementing the U.S. visit, in short, the timeline needs to be shortened considerably. I think Congress has been far too modest in its objectives and leaves considerable amount of vulnerability as a consequence of being too modest and shortening those deadlines.
The other good news about, if I might, Senator, about much of the world beginning to embrace the notion that we need biometrics to confirm identity and authenticate the documents is that we've just quietly reached an agreement with the European Union to get passenger name record information on people who will be boarding those flights from the European Union coming to the United States, so we can use a national targeting center, which we didn't have before 9/11, but which we do have now, to use that information and compare it against databases that we have. So again, we have, I think, a responsibility to protect our citizens. That's the foremost responsibility, but what I've detected over the past several months is greater interest internationally to use the same kinds of systems so they can protect their systems, their commercial airliners, their ports as well.